Welcome to Gold Fever Radio.
I go straight from the bank, gassing up the tank, cranking up the radio, playing old Hank. It ain't that long till I'm back at the farm.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Wednesday once again, September the 13th, 2023. Did you know that there is only 109 days left in this year? This year is about gone. Some of you might be wanting to say it wasn't a bad year, I don't think. It just seems like it was just hot, dragged on, but I don't think it was too bad of a year like in years past. But anyways, yes, it's almost gone. You know, today is National Uncle Sam's Day. It's also National Peanut Day. That's so stupid. They got some stupid things. It's also National Bald is Beautiful Day. Good thing I still got some hair. But I don't know who comes up with some of these national things, because I can think of a lot better national days than what they ever come up with. Let's see, on this day in 1963, what happened? Mary Kay launches her namesake company. That's all that's in history. What else is? Oh, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. If it is, you share birthdays with a lot of people. But anyway, Tyler Perry, he was born on this day, 1969. He's 54 years old. He was a TV producer. Ben Savage, born on this day, 1980. He's 43 years old. He's a TV actor. Okay, that's it for that. What we got going on events? We got our push. That's up there in the Meatview area. It's going to be a push where we go to metal detect. That's limited. There's still openings left on that. If you want more information, I'll give you that a little bit later to call the camp, and you can book in on that. We got our Patreon outing. That'll be held November 18th and 19th. Detector hunt. I'm going to meet with BLM out on the mining claim out here tomorrow, and hopefully, I can get this plan of operation all filed and everything okay, and then maybe we can start some pushes and have some material out there that we can play with. We got our New Year's event. That's December 28th to 1/1. That's our New Year's party. So you can still book up for that. You can check out everything going on. Oh, we got specials of the camp, so you can come in and camp at the camp. All that information is goldfeveradventuresandresort.com for the campground. We've also got that prize wheel going on for lots of prizes. There's still openings on that, and that's on Facebook page at Gold Fever Adventure. You can go sign up for the Facebook page. If you want any more information, 928-851-7167. And that's it for that. Let's see what's happening here in the chat room. What we got? Minuteman Adventures, you're first. Patty's Adventures, hello. I can never say that. Deadeye, I always want to say Deadeye. Deadeye takes me a while to get that. Anyways, Birdman. Paul, Richard Duke, Terry Curry, Josh Cooper. Hey, Josh, you coming up to Meadview again this year or this time? Herb Cato, hello. Bill Sherry, hello. Steve Collier. Anyway, so welcome, everybody. Welcome. I know some of you guys will jump in here a little bit later. But anyways, we have a guest. That's right. We have a guest. The one and only Mr. Wayne Tuttle. Some of you guys know him. Some of you will soon know him if you don't already. Let me bring him in here right now. Here he is. Hello.
Pop like that, like magic, I show up.
Hey, I remember, was it last time we did the show where you end up doing it by yourself?
Yeah, we had one of them storms like we had the other night roll through, and you guys lost power. And then everybody had to inform me that you guys were out. So for about 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, I was the only person anybody could hear or see. So I just kind of rambled on until you guys were able. Did you guys ever come back?
Yeah, we came back in.
Yeah. Like at the end. But yeah, I just kind of was lost there for a minute. Like, well, what do we do?
Well, so yeah, you took over. Let's see, Red. Hello, Red. Yeah, so those that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and all about that stuff?
My name is Wayne Tuttle. You probably kind of know me from a show, Legend of Superstition Mountains, from History Channel that I did a number of years back. I've also done shows like Unexplored, Unexplained. What is it? Cursed Oak Island, Digging Deeper shows, Beyond Oak Island. Work on a lot of those. You'll see that like Mysteries of the Unexplained or Unexplained Mysteries, or Mysteries of Mysteries. And when you see that, you'll see me pop in occasionally. And then there was the film Lust for Gold, A Race Against Time. I was in that. So a lot of stuff concerning the Lost Dutchman mine. A member of the Dons of Arizona, who was here locally in the Superstition Mountain Historical Society. So kind of involved all things superstitions and the Lost Dutchman mine, pretty much. So if you've heard of me, that's probably why you've heard of me.
You know, I should have realized earlier, man, knowing you would have that hat on.
I'm over here.
No, knowing you would have that hat on, I should have went and put on a different hat. Just.
Well, I thought about it, and then every time I wear without, and I had this on when I saw me and Jack were talking earlier. It's a Dutch Hunter Rendezvous hat, but I do that, and then everybody complains. Frank complains I wear this stupid hat all the time. But then when I don't, then everybody else complains. So I'd rather make the 90% happy than the 10% unhappy.
No, you look better in that hat. And that's what I
well, thank you. It's because you see me in the hat so much that it just seems right.
It is. Well, that's more you. It's more appropriate.
So comfortable hat.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so. You know what? A lot of people have heard of the Lost Dutchman and all of that, and a lot of people wonder if the whole legend is true. Does it still exist? Do you think anybody's ever found that? Is there a myth behind it? What's some of the history and all of that behind all of that?
Well, right now in Messenger, I have about 20 people that have found it. So people always say they found it. They unfortunately don't seem to come up with the gold, which is kind of problematic in that. But a lot of people have claimed to find it. I think it's still out there. Jacob Waltz was a real person. We know where he lived. There was gold when he died. The people that initially went and searched for the mine were people who were personal friends of his and had cared for him. And they believed in it very much, and they had no business in the mountains. So to take someone who has no business in those mountains and they spend the rest of their lives looking for it, there had to be something to it. So we have some bits and pieces of stuff that came from the ore, but for the most part, it's Jacob Waltz's story. And unfortunately, the geological studies that were never completed always lead people to believe there's no gold in the superstitions, which the superstitions have quite a bit of gold and silver. Frank Augustine, who was with me in the show, and Woody Wampler had a claim. It was a pocket that was running down and in an area in Hewitt Canyon, and they pulled $15,000 to $20,000 out of that. I know Frank said at one time, and this is many years ago, but I think the best day they had was in about 2, 3, 4 hours. They pulled 6 ounces out of it. So the gold's there. It's difficult to locate and find, like any place. And I've known a number of people have found it, but something significant as the place where Walt said no one's ever come up with that. And obviously the big tell would be someone to have it in their hand, show it to you. And it doesn't have to compare to anything. It would just have to be, there's a lot of this gold in one source in one place. And his mine, I think his ore is in a vein that's in quartz, and it's like popcorn kernels through the quartz, and it's wrapped in hematite, and it's about an 18-inch vein that runs back through there that he was working on. So a lot of that would give it away. and of course, obviously, the quantity and the quality of the gold. And just so that people know, because I know a lot of people don't prospect the superstition. Superstition gold is very, very easy to point out because it has a very greenish hue to it, has kind of this greenish haze into it because of the copper and silver that's in it. And it's all roughly around the same. I believe it's about 80% gold, 20% silver. So once you've seen a piece, and I've seen pieces from all over the superstitions, they all have that same quality and that same thing. And we do get people that buy gold somewhere and then say, oh, I found the Lost Dutchman mine. Here's some good pieces. And you look at them and it doesn't have that quality. And like I said, whether it's Hewitt Canyon, whether it's LaBarge Canyon, whether it's the Palmer mine, anywhere in the mountains, that gold, even the Mammoth, the Black Queen that are out in the Goldfield area, they all have that same greenish hue to them. Was that good enough? I don't know where you went. I'm all by myself here now.
No, you're good. So how come you never heard of anybody like that's ever said, hey, I found the Lost Dutchman? You know, as many people go in there and searching and hiking, how come nobody's ever found it?
Well, there's several problems. One, people do say they found it. We did a program, one of our YouTube programs, where I talked about particular, like, chronicled a number a decade, like the 70s. And I think in it, I talked about a number of people who found it, reported it to the paper, somehow lost it and found it again in another part of the mountains. So that's just kind of one of those things that happens regularly, is people always say they found it, but there's no proof. One of the problems is it's a caldera, so it's a very difficult area to work and look for. Walt said the gold would be in an area that a prospector wouldn't normally look. There's no tailings near it. It's in an inclined pit that's in an arroyo. So it's in an angled pit in an angled area up higher on the mountain. And he said he covered it over. So you have all those things. So you got to get somewhere up high in the mountains and look for someplace covered up or a low depression. And you're looking in an area where you wouldn't normally look for gold. So it's literally, you're following clues, looking in areas, and then you would find if you read a lot of the material, a lot of people went in the mountains, found depressed areas, dug them out to look for it. Unfortunately, the Mexicans were in there before Walt, so there's a lot of Mexican mines back in there, and there's a lot of older mines, and then they were opened and then they were covered again. So you're always running into different bits and pieces of, like, is this it? You can get excited and then find out, oh, this is nothing. So it's like a crapshoot, and it's kind of like you going out somewhere out in the dunes down in California and taking a little tiny $20 little piece of gold, placer gold, and then just stand at the top of a hill and just fling it in the air over your shoulder and then ask everybody to go out by hand and look for it. Because as soon as it hits that sand and it's moving, and it's going to be almost impossible to find. That's one of the things. The longer it's been, the harder it is, even with technology. And that's my belief, is the people earlier that went looking for it weren't looking smart. But as time went by and bad clues are introduced and the history develops, which we all know how that works, any story develops opinions and thoughts and theories, and they become incorporated into the actual original story. So it's harder and harder to find that thing you're looking for, which is why there's, we're still looking for all kinds of treasures throughout North America. In fact, one of the things I got you could be interested in, Jack, is there was a number of gentlemen. Thomas Penfield, everybody's heard of for the most part, the author of the treasure books of Treasures Arizona and those things. And then there was a gentleman named Oscar Branson that wrote a number of treasure hunting books and articles, and another man named Xanthus Carson, who went under the pen name of Kit Carson. Well, I acquired all their collections. I have 6 file cabinets now, 5-drawer file cabinets of all their files, all the stuff they picked up around the world from treasure stories. So we can sit here and say the Lost Dutchman, well, somebody should have found it now. I have basically a mother load of files that I go through, and there are so many stories that no one's ever found the treasure. I mean, you can go to any state in the United States and find 3 or 4 dozen stories that are factual and have a lot of information, but no one's ever been able to dig it up. And I've become a firm believer, the further we go in time, the harder it becomes. Because every time someone crosses a piece of ground, we generally check it off. Okay, well, someone's been there. It can't be there. And it's hard to have people meticulously look and agree because it takes so much time that by the time we cover so much space, then it's another generation going back and looking at another area. Oh, those guys didn't know what they're doing, just like we do. We always say, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. I know what I'm doing. And I believe it's just a combination of those things. Could it be found someday? Yeah. But there's other treasure stories out there and things that haven't been found. And every year someone finds more ruins or old prospect sites or prospects or old tunnels that have been covered over. So every year we do find things out there. They're not the Lost Dutchman, but they're evidence that, wow, after 100 and some odd years, we're still finding things that nobody knew was out there. So it's a pretty rugged area. Anyone's ever been out there off trail, it's a rugged area. And you could hide something. I found people that are 40, 50 feet off the trail up in some of the canyons, and you can't see the trail, and they were lost. They could not figure out how to get out of the mountains. And I pointed out the trail is actually right directly below you. I don't know what the dogs see. They just decided they opened the door. But no, so it's just like any treasure story. And one of the things that's great about it is it's one of the oldest, and it's probably one of the better well-known. I think you would have to say, along with possibly Oak Island, which has got a lot of push because of the TV show and other material. And maybe Jesse James treasure, kind of the KGC thing. But other than those, there's not a lot of American treasure stories that have probably lasted as long and probably has had as many prominent people. I mean, we got to remember former State Attorney General Bob Corbin was a Dutch hunter and still is. Bob spent a lot of years up in the mountains. Chuck Kenworthy and his partner, John Wayne, were out there searching and so forth. Richard Peck, who was a millionaire, retired millionaire, put his money where his mouth was. And he had crews that he actually helicoptered in beer, ice, and steaks. So there are guys that are very smart that have actual good money that for the sense of adventure have been out there and put time into it. And, it's just, I think somebody may find it someday. And when they do, it'll be kind of a sweet thing, but it'll be kind of bitter because I think just having the mythology and the story and the sense of adventure always out there kind of is a very cool thing. Every time you go out, you never know, is this that much? It's just like gold prospecting or metal detecting. You never know where you're going to hit something. And I've seen people tell stories where in the weirdest place where they expected nothing, they found probably the best thing they ever found in their entire time. So you just never know where it's going to be.
Well, don't you think, so let's just say Jacob Walt, he had to find it, whether it was an already started mine that somebody had already started and he stumbled upon it, or if he found it himself. You just don't look into the mountain and say, well, there's some rocks and it's got gold in it, so let me chop all these out. You got your waste rock and your Hulse rocks, and you're going to have rocks left behind. You're going to have some type of, are you going to dispose of all that stuff and cover it up? Or
Jack,
there should be evidence.
Waltz's claim is it was the Peralta family had been mining it. And Waltz was taken in there by the Peraltas. Now, this is during the time period when Arizona was being sold from Mexico, becoming part of the United States. And the Peraltas were worried about the mining claims. Waltz was actually a naturalized citizen in Los Angeles County, California. So having him and anyone with him would have kept them out of trouble and allowed them to have legal claim because they had American citizens with them. They took him to there, and Waltz's story was after they went there and returned, basically Peralta made him a deal is everything we took out this last trip, I'll tell you what, I'll sign a note that gives you ownership of the mine. You can go do what you want for your share. I'll supply you and you can go back and take. And Waltz and his partner said, well, there was plenty. So they figured that was a pretty good deal. So they didn't want to file a claim because you don't want everybody up in the mountains looking over your shoulder. So they thought, okay, we got his word. So we'll have actually paperwork. Waltz had lost claims before. The gross lode up in Prescott was a really good gold area. And he lost out on that because of other people's shenanigans with the books. So they just saw it as a good deal. So they'd been shown it and they went back. But Waltz always said there was a crack nearby where they dump all the tailings and stuff. So he said by the mine itself, once he filled it in, you wouldn't know it's there. The idea being is there's nothing prominent that shows out. Now you can be in the superstitions, and if you know what you're looking for, you take an old timer out. Sometimes they will, by the vegetation or something, or the mercury content. But I've been in areas where, and I know you've spent some time in the superstitions. Take a metal detector and a pinpointer out there and tell me how many hot rocks are in 10 square feet. I mean, it's literally because it was a volcano. It's a caldera. You can hit areas where everything pings. The metal detector is useless. The pinpointer is useless. So now you got to dig by hand and pan slowly by hand. And like I said, Frank and Woody hit that pocket, and it was amazing. I mean, most people just would love to hit a spot like that in 2 or 3 hours, pick out 6 ounces, nice and easy. But it's so hit and miss because the whole superstitions are like that. You look at areas and think, oh, this is a good spot. Nothing. Then you go to somewhere else, and we were out by Black Cross Butte and talking about how the area really wouldn't be conducive. Over by Horse Mesa, and we were looking at a lot of things. We got but we had an assay that kind of showed gold in the area. And Frank was just walking down this small little wash, just a little tiny thing, looked down and started finding pieces of gold in it that you could actually see with your eyeballs just walking through. And we got super excited, but the TV show told us that's anticlimactic. So we don't want you finding the gold here. So we were starting to find gold. We wanted to trace the source up the hill. We did it. We filmed a lot of it, but they never showed it because they said it would get people too excited, and we were only halfway through the season. And they had more stuff they wanted to cover because we found a bunch of quartz veins that we tested for gold. And then we went up and we found an area where someone had been going through and screening dirt and stuff from somewhere. We never found where they were bringing the dirt in from, but it was high up on this hill, and there was this fine dirt that they'd been screening. So we knew we found something someone had worked on. We found gold in the area. So again, but we would have never really thought of like stake a claim there, really seriously look. Now we went back, this is probably about 6 years ago, and Frank went back and started checking, and we started testing and assaying everything in the area. We found there's a ton of gold there, but it's in this dark quartz rock. And to extract it would cost you more money than actually the value that's in there. So there could be $1 million worth of gold there, but it's going to cost you $2 million to go in and extract it if the Forestry Service gave you permission to strip that area and do that. So there is that profit thing. So you always run into that. I don't know if you do, but I always run into that thing of where the place you least expect it is sometimes where something pops up that keeps you turning your head thinking, what the heck was that about? Why was that guy digging there? Why did I find this there? What was going on here? And I think Walt's spot was like that. They had a nice spot where at the time they found something towards the surface. They dug down, followed the vein. And Walt said there was 2 pits, like pits next to each other. But one wasn't continued, which tells you they were working the surface, and then one of them went deep. The other one probably played out very quickly. So there's enough detail to say, okay, it sounds like a good thing. It's up in the caldera. It's something that came up through the rock up high, which is unusual as itself. But then you go through and a lot of the areas in the superstitions, and I know, again, Jack, that you've been out there, you get up there and they'll tell you there's no quartz, there's nothing. And then you'll go up on top of a hill somewhere out there and just find quartz everywhere. You'll find rose quartz, you'll find red quartz, you'll find chalcedony everywhere. And then I was told at one time, you'll never find gold if you're, in an area that's just got chalcedony everywhere. And then one day I found a bunch of gold, a bunch of good pieces of ore that someone had cleaned out, but I could never find the source of ore. It looked like hand-cobbed pieces where someone had worked it, and there was a little gold left in it. It was heavy iron, but it matched nothing in the area. But I was in such a remote, high area. There's no way someone would have brought that up to that spot from someplace completely different. So I was like, this doesn't match. It came from underground somewhere, but we searched and searched that area and never could find out where the source of that ore would have been from. So I think his was something like that. Once you cover it, it's almost impossible to kind of see it. You almost have to guess at it unless there's a technology someday or pure blind luck, someone's going to run into it. So you take the clues, and then you have to, without the Forestry Service dig a hole somewhere and hope you hit something. But additionally, Walt said the thing he was going in before he died, everyone has to remember, is his camp was near the mine, not close, but near it. And he said in his camp he had buried caches of gold. And he had retrieved one that when he left. He came back and covered the mine and retrieved the second. The third one, which is bigger than the first two combined, is still there, buried in like a pothole, covered over. And he said that was what he wanted to retrieve before he died. He said that was more than enough for him, Reinhard Petrasch, and Julia Thomas to live off of. And he said, that's the richest stuff we had. It's still there buried. And he said, I'll take you to the camp and then I'll tell you where the mine is. But he said, I'm too old and you guys are in no shape to mine. I'll show you where the mine's at, but we're just going to go get this cash. And that was his big deal, was getting that cash. So maybe someday somebody will find that, which will be really super high grade ore.
Well,
and if you find that, well, think about it, Jack. If you find that, then you can match it if you find the mine.
Okay, so here's the thing. You said that, so a lot of people tried to follow Jacob and try to figure out where his mine was at. But if you said that he got it from the Peraltas, then why don't you follow the clues from the Peraltas to try to figure out where that mine was at? Okay,
well, two problems there. One, I've always believed that the stories of people following Waltz in the mountains is just purely fictitious. I think that's just kind of like oral history, as people want to be, we do. When you look at the early newspaper reports after he died and when Julia Thomas went looking for the mine, the papers couldn't even get his name right. Old timers, there were people there. We got to remember, Waltz lived into his 80s. Well, most of his contemporaries and people that really knew him died before him. He lived longer than he expected at that time in that era during that period, especially living as rugged as he did in Phoenix. So you have that. The Peralta family, the problem is generationally, they had some idea of this stuff, but the Peraltas, after the Gadsden purchase, there wasn't that welcoming of the Mexican nationals to come up and mine anymore. And so a lot of things changed at that time. We believe some parts of the family had information. I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Fish, the treasure hunter.
Yeah,
but Frank Fish, when he heard about Adolph Ruth and that stuff, went to Mexico because he wasn't looking for the Gonzalez family, which was the Adolph Ruth story. He was looking for the Peralta family. He found members of the Peralta family and found a map, but they told him two different branches of the family had the map. And so he needed the second map. He never found it. We have a map we call the Frank Fish map that he had. And he said you would never be able to find the mine probably without the second one. And he didn't spend much time looking for it because he said he could never find that other branch of the family. And that's something generationally. I mean, just look at how many, there's people I speak to that are just one generation, two generations removed from someone who's hunted in the superstitions. And you expect the family to have stories. And I've sat around with those families and they're just almost nothing because they weren't interested in it. Way too often, generationally, the family doesn't think much of it. They just go, oh, that was something he did. Second generation treasure hunters is rare. Third generations is very rare. So when you look at that aspect, the Peralta family, after the massacre and whatever bad luck they had, they probably, with the Gadsden purchase and everything else, they're not as interested in coming back up into Arizona. And what long do you bide your time? 20, 25 years. Well, then the guy that meets Waltz, well, he goes up, maybe he doesn't feel welcome. Maybe he dies, whatever happens with him. Well, that next generation isn't really that interested in it, probably, because now it's the United States of America. We had you got to remember at the time, all the Apache problems, everything else going on. So by the time that second, third generation comes in, how much knowledge do they have? Because I can tell you, I can tell you things I know attributed or genealogy to my great-great-grandfather, but I didn't know the man, and I don't really know much in depth of what kind of person he was or what he was into or what he did or how he cleaned his rifle or anything like that. So that is one of the problems you run into, is especially with the Peralta family. They were reintroduced to the story themselves, and then we found they actually kind of had knowledge of it, but it was kind of like a family story, but it wasn't the Lost Dutchman mine. It was about some mines that were up northern in Arizona or New Mexico. So you realize, oh, it's the same story, but they don't have a Jacob Waltz, a Lost Dutchman. They don't have all that in it. So they're not recognizing it, because down in Mexico, Jacob Waltz and the Lost Dutchman mine is not a famous mine, because there's plenty of mines down there that are lost mines that are famous. So we run into all those problems. And the biggest problem, Jack, is the first 20, 30 years people are searching for the Lost Dutchman. They're not looking at that information. They're not saying, let's find a Peralta family member. Hey, what was Jacob Waltz like? What was his mannerism? They didn't gather back. They just were like, what's a clue? What's a clue? What's a clue? So you get 5 or 6, 7 good clues from people that don't even know the mountains. And then all the rest of the stuff falls off. And now you're trying to grasp it like, okay, but what were the Peraltas doing there? How many mines were there? How active were they there? And there's other stories such as, I'm trying to think of, there was the Salazar survey. A man named Cristobal Peralta showed up, and he came in with a map and a series of tintypes. And they went out. Clay Worst was very familiar with it. The guy he met never was able to copy anything, but off of memory, he kind of went, and they tried to take some of the numbers because they thought it had to be a survey, which helped locate the mine. But they had no starting, no end point, nothing. They were just grasping, trying to use this information. And nobody knows what happened to Cristobal Peralta or the guy that worked with him. They both spoke Spanish. And so they went off that. So there's a Peralta family member showing up probably 20, 30 years after Waltz, who's looking with some coordinates for the mine. He disappears now again, but we don't know who he is, and we have just partial pieces of that. So you're always hoping some family member, but again, I think everybody here will understand is someone passes away, how much stuff that might be important that they just look through and go, this is crap, and throw it in the dumpster. And we don't know how many times someone's notes, material, whatever, gets destroyed, lost. Just, Tom Collenborn had the story of his father's journals. And his father had been searching back in the mountains since the 20s. And Tom was aware his dad had taken him out in the mountains. Well, there was a flood, and the garage flooded, and he was going through boxes and throwing stuff out. And he was looking in the boxes to see what he was throwing out. And he found his father's journals in there. They were extremely water damaged. He lost a lot of information. Tom didn't know they existed. And they came that close to going in the trash can. So there's that problem with everybody always is if someone's not interested, if it hadn't been Tom, anyone else in the family might have just said, this stuff's ruined. Who knows what it was, and threw it out. Tom recognized it for what it was and then tried to dry it out and preserve what he could of it, which is great. But again, how often does that happen with maps? Stuff and what does a real treasure map from the Peraltas generally look like? We don't even know what it would be. Could it be just letters? Could it be a series of numbers? I doubt it's coded or encrypted, because it's just something you're passing to a family member, and I'm not going to encrypt it or code it to some way that my kids would never find it. So I would think it's pretty simple, but that's another problem is if nobody recognizes what it is, 2 generations down, they're just going to probably toss it out, or it's sitting in a family Bible somewhere. And because of the language barriers and so forth, nobody's ever come across it. Because the few people that have journeyed into Mexico, those really small towns, it's now, especially the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, some of those very small towns, it's very, very dangerous to go down there now. So people are dying in those little, in the middle of nowhere towns because of the cartels and so forth. So we have all these things going against us all times. And I think that goes for just not the Lost Dutchman, but all treasure hunting. I think everybody in treasure hunting runs into those obstacles all the time.
Well, so few questions here. Why do you think they turned the superstitions into a protected area or wilderness area? And other people say or think that maybe, like I've heard, that maybe the Lost Dutchman's mine is now underwater when they made that lake or made that new lake up there.
I would think that was too far north. It started becoming a wilderness area much earlier on. It just was open to mining and exploration. So the closure to the mining happened in 81. So that was a closure to the mining. Before that, it still was the superstition wilderness area because what was it, in the 20s, 30s when they started making the national parks and the wilderness areas. So it fell under that. Well, a very interesting thing, and I'm trying to remember the name. Richard Leville, I think it is, was a geologist from ASU. Came out and was talking once, and I listened to one of his lectures, and we had a long talk afterwards. He said one of the problems is, if you look at it, the United States government always wants the geological survey of the superstitions for the wilderness and for the closure to mining to be like it was completed. He said it was nowhere near completed. They just started it. He said the area is conducive to gold. They just did a really shoddy job, never really even came close to getting everything done. And then it just sat there, and everybody always thinks, oh, that's the finished prospect. There's no gold in the superstitions. And he said, as a geologist, he was talking during his lecture, telling people where the gold would be. It was interesting because he said the first area would be the Goldfield area, which is very well known for the bulldog, the mammoth, the black queen, the wasp. He said the second area would be the Hewitt Canyon area, which is known for a number of different mines, a lot of silver, not as much gold, but a lot of silver in there. And of course, we go further south, and we run into the Silver King, and then we run into the copper mines. But he said out in the area along Peralta Road, going to the Dons camp, he said he's never heard any significant discoveries, but as a geologist, he said that area would be very, very conducive. He would always expect to find gold in there. But I've never known. I know some people found some cinnabar, but the mineralization there, I've never heard of any significant gold ever really being taken out of that area, which means just no one's maybe looked in the right spot. Because this is a geologist that shows that area is just as ripe as the other areas. He says it's the same thing, so you should be able to find something there. And I don't know how much time you've spent in that area, but as much as they say it geologically could be the more conducive area, I've never heard of a single story of anybody finding any decent gold in that area. So, but on the northern end, up in the washes coming out by First Water, there's some good gold that comes out of the mountains when there's heavy rains and gets into those washes and stuff that comes out. So, there's stuff in there. Where is it? And I know you did spend some time. You spent time out by Malapai, right?
No, I think I went in on First Water and went up to Garden.
Okay. You didn't cross further back into Second Water past Boulder or that back in there?
I think we walked back there. It was flooding. The furthest I think I went is like Charlie Boy Springs up in all that area.
Okay, you were south of that area. Okay, so and you passed LaBarge on the way in, going up the middle of Peters Mesa. Yeah. But there's things that people have found in there. I mean, you passed the Red Hills. Hey, Jack, you went too far, because that's one of the clues. If you passed the 30 Red Hills, you went too far. But you went as far as Charlie Boy, so that's a good. And you went in through Garden Valley to Charlie Boy, or did you go through Brush Corral?
No, we went up through First Water, where you pass that. That's really cool. That big, where you go in, you see. I got that book here. That big Indian head up on the wall or up on the mountain.
Yeah. Oh, is that a Kenworthy book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the big Indian that's up there. But anyway, and we camped below that one night, and then we went up into we were up in we've been a couple times. I'm lost how we went all.
Well, I thought when you were talking to me one time, maybe it's someone else though, was down along Malapai. But anyways, people find some gold in the area, but then they can't figure out where it came from, which we all know there can be pockets that run out of stuff. And since it was a volcano, who knows where it's traveling? So everybody can find a little something. Charlie Boy's a nice area if you made it there. That's a nice spot. So
we went there for water.
Yeah. Well, there is water there. It's better shape than it was in the 70s, 80s. That was another problem. As much as I'm not a big favor of the mining closure back in there, because there were so many groups that were mining, Charlie Boy in some areas were getting just destroyed, becoming polluted, and just worse for wear. I'm not a big fan of the trail hiking and that kind of thing. I like being off trail and bushwhacking and all the other stuff. But the guys that were out there, they left a lot of trash. There was a lot of guys that were just out there treasure hunting, but they were just destroying stuff. And it wasn't just clues and stuff, as they were just destroying the land. They were just digging, and they were burying blasting caps and dynamite out there to hide it from the Forestry Service. But definitely the trash. And Charlie Boy at one time was not looking as good as now. After the fire, it's not as good now, but it did survive. But yeah, there was a time, if you look at old footage or old pictures of Charlie Boy back in the 40s or 50s, it just looks like an oasis. It's beautiful. And they wore that out. So that was one of the things the mining closure did, is it pushed a lot of these big camps, because there were like Crazy Jake's camp up on Peters Mesa. They had some pretty big camps and had a lot of people in there, and they weren't known always for hauling all their trash out. So that was kind of problematic in that. But I don't know where we started at, but we had you go through First Water and down through Garden Valley, and you ended up at Charlie Boy, which is a really sweet, nice trip. By the way.
Yeah, I don't remember, but you don't. Well, I remember we talked once before. When I went in, I took the 2300 metal detector in, and you passed some old like ranches, ranch areas, and I detected a little bit. Didn't find anything, and then we stayed there in Garden Valley, and that's where I didn't know it at the time, but there was a group of us in there, and we were picking up the pottery shards that were all around there, and I thought, oh, these are really cool. And then this lady says, like, man, there's these indentations all over up there and behind there. And we didn't know what those indentations were. And you said they were how they buried the Indians, straight up and down.
Yeah, well, in a kneeling position, generally facing east. And that would be the Salado and the Hohokam up in that area. So, yeah, there's so much stuff up in there. That is one crazy aspect, and I've talked about it, at times to get people to understand is, when I was a kid, you could go back there as monos and matates just laying on the ground. It was such a cool history lesson to walk through it, take pictures, and check all this stuff out. Garden Valley used to be literally, you couldn't make a step without hitting pottery shards and arrowheads and spearheads. But people keep taking stuff illegally, and now most of that's gone. But we still find things preserved in there. But there were so many small communities all through there. And like in Garden Valley, there were so many burials, which is unusual because it was such a kind of a decent sized community there, but they were burying their own people right there, almost within the community, which is odd and unusual, which I always found an aspect is generally Native groups don't like to be anywhere near the burials, the graveyards of anyone. Yet the Apaches, I know when you were in Garden Valley, if you go like the Black Mesa Trail going down towards Brush Corral through there, the Apaches had an encampment down in that area. And I was surprised when I found that out and someone was up there with me talking about some of the stuff they had found. I was kind of surprised that they had basically decided to build an encampment that close to a burial ground. Because, well, there's plenty of people today still don't want to camp in the graveyard.
I didn't know that was a graveyard.
Oh, Garden Valley. There's a lot of history there. There was a Mormon settlement there for a long time. But in fact, it's crazy to think of this. That was a road going through there. All the way there was a road that used to go all the way to Choyatank, up in the canyon. So they used to be able to drive Model A's and Model T's back through there. So that shows you how different it's changed since the ranchers were pulled out. Those roads are just disappearing. So, and you're in some spots, you realize, man, look at how the bedrock's worn down and stuff. That's because there was a lot of vehicular traffic for about 20, 30, 40 years in there. But the Native American kind of footprint in there. I always love to get people and say, hey, on a really good full moon night, let's go through Garden Valley in the middle of the night. And you can always tell who the shaky guys are. And then it's really funny. Then you'll find the family that's camped out there for the weekend, right in the middle of like 4 different graves without a clue. Nothing ever happens to them. So you just leave it be. You just like, you know what? I'm not going to say anything. You just tell the kids, if you find any little really cool white sticks, just stick them back in the ground for us. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. No, we camped right there. I think we spent 5 days. At one time we stayed there in Garden Valley. And people on horses would go by, and we'd talk to them. And we used to have to climb that mountain that was right there to get out on the cell phones.
Oh, the one where the grinding holes are to the northwest?
Yeah. You had to climb that little hill. But we did walk all the way to the back or walk further down. We hit that big canyon, and it had roaring water flying down through there. And I think that's the same one that would go up into
So
Oh,
you
that
probably
town.
went down towards Boulder Canyon.
Okay, and that goes
Going
into
east, going due east.
that I don't remember. But what's that town that there's a town up above, and I've heard people walk that town uh, where they put dollar bills in the restaurant.
Oh, the Tortilla Flat.
Yeah, Tortilla
Okay,
Flats.
so yeah, you were probably out by Boulder, over by
Okay.
Boulder. Okay, yeah. If you go north from Garden Valley, you'll hit another section. It's kind of interesting. There's some old coyote holes that they mined, and some mining prospects up there to the north, and goes back to Hackberry Creek. So that's a pretty hike. If you go through Garden Valley, go due north, you'll find the trail, and you can go through there and hike down Hackberry. You can go out to Hackberry Springs, and when you come back south, if you take the right pathway, you can go through obviously when you go to Garden Valley, you go through the First Water Ranch, the original ranch site, which is barely visible. Well, the second ranch site is on the other way coming back in. It's behind the horse parking lot down over the hill. And that one still has all the corrals and everything there. Nobody's there anymore, but that they moved when they'd made the wilderness area. They moved the ranch, the active ranch, outside the wilderness area, just outside. So that was the time period. So they took the first water, tore everything down, and then put it outside. When I was a kid, the trails going in, you could still tell were roads. It was very easy to walk in. In fact, I know you didn't go this way, but for anyone that ever goes in First Water and is heading towards Brush Corral, you go up over, and as you make that first, where the trail ends, you go over one way goes over First Water Creek over to the First Water Ranch. That's the way you went, Jack. If you go to the right, it kind of goes uphill a little. That top of the hill is where all the Dutch hunters back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s used to park their cars to go in. That was the parking lot. So that shows you the parking lot's now about a quarter mile back up the hill for the Forestry Service. So guys, now you're looking at, oh, this is a trail, but that used to be the road to the parking lot. And when I was a kid, that was all real visible. I mean, you would walk down it and think, how tough is it, man? It's a road, you know. It's like, and that road used to the one area is called Transmission Gap, but it was pretty visible. The road was still there. It's not where the trail is now, almost all the way to Brush Corral Canyon out by Blacktop Mesa. And in fact, a man named John Pierce wanted to finish off and gravel it all the way because he was doing what's the stuff you find in little silica. He had a silica mine back in there. And he wanted to be able to get the road all the way through to get the silica out. So, which shows you, again, people were making money in mining back in there. We're talking the 40s and 50s even.
Wasn't Blacktop where you get in there and it sits way up on the thing? It's a harder trail to get up to, but there's a lot of ruins or something up on Blacktop or something.
Blacktop, you hit Brush Corral Basin. And you'll see you can kind of see Weaver's Needle. There's a ridge, and you can kind of see it off in the distance. You continue forward. There's a mountain that's called Palomino. It's the Horse's Eye Mountain. If you go between, and then the second one's called Blacktop. Some people call it Blacktop Mesa. The trail goes to the north end of Blacktop, and then drops. That's called Bull Pass. That drops in to go to Charlie Boy. If you take that Bull Pass, you first get on it. You'll see there's some markers, and you can follow up the trail to the top of Blacktop Mesa. Up there's petroglyphs, a lot of different markings, and all around what I would call because it sits at an angle, kind of sits from northwest to southeast, not necessarily due north-south, but on that southeast end, there's a lot of mines down around the perimeter base of it and going up the mountain. There's a lot of holes up in there. And you could tell a lot of people, because there was a belief, Walter Perrine was one of them, but a lot of people believed that there's something hollow in there. And they would find cracks and drop stuff and hear it go forever. So they were always digging and trying to find a way to get into pop into one of those cracks and holes to find that stuff. There was the story of one of the cracks. I know Bob Ward worked with the group that they would drop rocks in and they could hear it fall for a count of like 4 or 5 and then hear it hit water. And because of the volcano and the calderas, it's believed there are lava tubes and water down underneath in these places. It's just no one's successfully ever been able to find a way into these chambers. And Tom Collenborn's dad found a crack he believed led to him. But when he found it, and we don't know where it's at, I just recently did a story on it, but we don't know where it's at. We can't relocate it. I've not been able to find it, but he believed it went down and probably led into one of those groups, that those cave systems under the mountains. And that would always be interesting, because when you find something like that, you might find gold back in there.
So the trucking nomad guy, so he says the gold signature of the Lost Dutchman matches gold from the Lost Basin. He had the Paiutes pick up gold and traded it for knives and cookware. Now, I've been to the Lost Basin.
Yeah.
Gold. I got a bunch of Lost Basin gold.
Well, Jack, then you can bring the Lost Basin gold to the rendezvous, and then we'll put it next to the Superstition gold, and I'm going to probably bet you it don't match.
Okay, I got some. You know, my nugget jar is right here. I got to try to fill my nugget jar up. I got a long ways to go.
Yeah, so, sounds like it.
So I started on this one, but there's
one of the stories I've always heard was that the Vulture Mine gold was what Waltz worked there and high graded at the Vulture, and that was where he got his gold. Problem is, the gold he had did not match it. Secondly, there's nothing that ever, and no evidence whatsoever that he ever was there, worked there, or was anywhere near. We know he had the Gross Lode, the Big Rebel, the General Grant, because he did file claims. And then we know where he lived at another period of time. So there's no evidence. So I think always that story came out of, and all the more power to him, but the guys that run things like the Vulture Mine, it's a great story to say, no, this is where the real Lost Dutchman mine is, and I can get people to buy into it. And, you know, people say, does it ever piss you off? And I say, for every person that seriously is looking for the mine and is looking for it in the wrong place, that never seems to irritate me. Because if they want to spend all their time in Wickenburg, and I've been in Wickenburg and I found some gold in that area, and I'm very familiar with a lot of history along the Hassayampa and that stuff. But if someone's in a completely wrong area, I will tell them. But if they don't want to believe me, it doesn't really hurt my feelings that they're not in the same area I'm in. I'm perfectly fine with no competition.
Well, here's no competition, because so I kind of have a little belief. I don't spread it too much, but so we know, or at least the story was that Jacob Walsh was the wagon master boss or whatever at the Vulture Mine. We knew he hung out in the Vulture area. So you hear the talk of Weaver's Needle and all of that. How come maybe Weaver's Needle really wasn't Vulture Peak?
But here's the problem. Waltz never used Weaver's Needle as part of his mine description.
But why does it's always in the thing?
That's part of that. That's part of that thing of someone attributes it. P.C. Bicknell, every time a newspaper writer wrote an article, they kept putting things in there and talking about things. And people take those as clues. Julia Thomas talked to Jim Bark in 1892 when she was searching for the mine, and Reinhard Petrasch did. They told him a lot of the clues they knew. There wasn't a Weaver's Needle clue. There wasn't a sun strikes the shadow at 4 p.m. clue. A lot of the stuff wasn't there. And we know where Waltz lived. We knew where he searched. We knew where he traveled, who he traveled with. And I mean, like I said, the Vulture Mine's always a good one. And if they need that, I mean, well, you know, we ripped off Henry Wickenburg, so we might as well throw Jacob Waltz and stealing ore in there too. But they tested ore samples and the jewelry and stuff, and it was found because Greg Davis, I believe, with Thomas Glover, they went into the original adit area and where the original veins were to take samples and test samples, and they found it wasn't nothing. There was nothing from the superstition stuff, that any of the stuff that was attributed to Waltz in those areas, none of it matched. But it will never silence it. It's just like anything. Once someone has their eye on thinking, well, this is the story and they've heard it, that's it. Now we have to remember, other than Jim Bark and Sims Ely talking to Julia Thomas and Reinhard Petrasch early on, and that was because Jim Bark owned the ranch in the area, and Julius and Reinhard believed because he owned the ranch, he had a better chance of finding it than they did. So one of his cowboys or someone might come upon a clue. The only people we get information from early on, and what spread a lot of it, was authors. So it was an author going to write an entertaining story about Jacob Waltz, who they misnamed, called the wrong thing, did other things. And it wasn't till the Don. Now we're getting back to the Dons in Arizona when they started Trek and out in the superstitions. The Dons put together with one of their members, Superstition Gold, which was the first book, and that's 1935. So it's not till 1935. And think about that. That's almost 45 years later when the first book comes out. And that was meant to be just an entertaining piece concerning opening people to the superstitions and some of the stories. Barry Storm's first book, Trail of the Dutchman, is probably 39. And then Thunder God's Gold, and then Simsy, all the rest of those books are the mid 40s into the 50s. So a lot of times when we get that early information, it's corrupted, not those guys' books, but a lot of the early stories and tales and everything was corrupted by newspaper guys. And you can see where they were just kind of putting, throwing whatever they could in there. So there's Weaver's Needle. So let's put a circle around it and say it's somewhere in here. And people will actually quote clues. And it's hard to explain to someone is Jim Bark wrote a manuscript. It was unpublished. We still have it. He wrote that in the 20s before anything was published. He was the first person to meet them. He knew Julia Thomas. He'd met Waltz. He knew Reinhard Petrasch. He questioned them and based a lot of this on his questions and answers he got with them. So, but people will blow that off as a source. So you can explain that to me, Jack, the guy that knew them all, that actually interviewed them, that wrote stuff down, people will blow him off in favor of newspaper articles by guys that came in the whole place, 3-4 years later, or even 10-15 years later. And with every treasure story, that's the problem. Because once someone introduces something, it catches on. And Herman Petrasch was even guilty of it. Reinhardt's brother. By the time it's the 40s, 50s, Herman's hearing all these other versions of the story. He starts taking those new versions that he's hearing and taking parts of them and putting them in his story. So his story keeps altering. Dick Holmes' story altered. Because every time they heard new information that could be really true, they kept going with it. Jim Bark is the only person in the first 50 years that said Jacob Waltz was a citizen. He had citizenship papers. Dick Holmes even said in his manuscript that Jacob Waltz did not tell anybody where the mine was because he wasn't a citizen. Jacob Waltz was pretty aware that he was a naturalized citizen and he had papers. So, that's one of the problems with clues is you got to take a book, and if you get the wrong book, so I always take the books and then I go through and they call it the wheat from the chaff. And you have to just kind of go through and look what the source. 3 Red Hills. If you pass the 3 Red Hills, you went too far. Waltz always said his mine is in a north-south trending canyon and a north-south trending canyon. His camp's up high. You have to find the camp to find the mine, but you can't find the mine without the camp, and you can't find the camp without the mine. You have to know the general area. He said there's a trick in the trail when you're getting up in there. And we're not sure whether it's the camp or the mine, one from the other. But he said there's a trick in the trail where you got to go between 2 rocks. There's 2 stones you have to go, a hole in a rock. And we're not sure what that makes. And then he said there was water closer to the mine that would pool up, but they didn't camp that close. But he said there was a rock face that faced the mine. People think it's a rock carved like a face, but it's actually just a rock face. And the idea is that he said during the wet season and so forth, the water would drain over it and it had the marks from like a waterfall. So we kind of know all that, but to say the gold was, I don't recall anything to say, the gold shines in the sun from the setting sun. I mean, that means his mine literally has to be, if you've been in the mountains, Jack, once the sun gets to 4 o'clock, it hits the mountains. You can't get the sun to go into the mine shaft unless you're on the western superstitions out by Apache Junction. I mean, the shadows overtake fast in the mountains. So his mine couldn't be facing in a north-south trending canyon, kind of facing that way, because the sun would never shine in it unless it was facing south. And then in the afternoon sun, how would the afternoon sun? So people make up a clue like that. People follow it, look for it. And I'm thinking, well, but just logic should tell you there's an impossibility in some of those things. So,
well, I guess.
And additionally, for anybody interested, we at www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com, we post the bark notes because they're so hard to find and that family never published them. We have the unpublished manuscript and we put it out there so people could read it and copy it and look at it and see one of the original source materials for the Lost Dutchman mine. So we wanted to present that always to help people to understand is like, and then like I said, I always say the names of the books because I want people to buy them in the order. You can buy the latest book, but then you find, wow, crap, he didn't put in the first 5-6 books written about it by people that lived in the era. It's always best to go back to the source, pick up stuff, and then come forward and then see what people had to say about that stuff, what's missing.
Well, you talked to Weaver's Needle, so like all these books.
Well, because it's a good-looking thing. It's a good-looking.
They show Weaver's Needle and all these books.
Yeah, it's a good-looking thing. Come on. It's like my hat. It don't mean shit, Jack. It's recognizable.
Of all the books out there, which one do you think is the best book that's the most probably accurate in talking about the superstitions and everything else?
It's a tricky question, but I would tell people if they are at a used bookstore and they find Jack Carlson and Elizabeth Stewart's hiking guide, the first one that's one single book, Superstition Mountains, get that book. It has the story, some of the stories in it, some of the details. It has the hiking trails, tells you where things are, and even stuff that's not listed on maps. It tells you the place names and stuff in the mountains and where people were, where they found gold. If that's not enough, they did 2 separate volumes. It's called Superstition Trails West and Superstition Trails East. Now, Trails East has a lot more of the cowboy ranching history in it, but those 2 books are going to give you the stories, the trails, the sites. If you're into hiking, if you're into camping, you're never going to get lost probably with those books. That'll help you out immensely. But they have, Jack included the stories and tales and stuff in that. Now, the reason I say it's such a good source is Jack's not looking for the Lost Dutchman mine. Elizabeth's not looking for the Lost Dutchman mine. So they have no opinion. They're just stating what facts they found and what people have told them and so forth. It's very straightforward. The problem with most books are they have someone's opinion, what their belief, their ideology listed in it, and it can get you wrong. Those books are great sources if you just, like I said, if you get one of those books, it just is awesome. In fact, I always keep them around. Here's the Superstition Trails West. And there's a book that's called East with it. And these are just awesome books. They have the pictures, but the other thing is they have maps and they have the coordinates. And they tell you where to go to park and how to hook up. And they even have off-trail stuff. And then they have stuff like, old pictures and stories. And then it follows along as you're going along the trail. When you get familiar with the book, you'll see it'll tell you what to look for, like grinding holes, where some old ruins were, or where something was at one time. And you'll be able to see those types of things. So those are excellent resources because it gets you started, not only familiar with the mountains, and then, of course, they'll have a bibliography and an index that's going to give you other material to kind of last to. So while I would always say, get the bark notes, read those. Get Barry Storm's Trail of the Dutchman, I think, is the best book he ever did. Thunder God's Gold is more in the vernacular and more an entertaining read. Trail of the Dutchman is probably the better book. Very hard to find at this point. It's pretty rare. But these books are great because once you've read the 2 books here, or you get Jack's first edition, which is a 1 volume that encompasses pretty much mostly the Western superstitions, those books, these will always pay off. And the only reason you find the used copy of the first edition, the 1 edition first ones, is because these came out and people replaced them with this, which has some of the identical stuff. But anywhere you want to go in the superstitions is going to take you trail by trail, off trail, all kinds of stuff, and give you the history. So, and I can't say enough about Jack's always updating these. Every couple of years or so, he gets some more. He publishes more, updates the little things and stuff in them. So I would say in the end, that's probably introductory. And for anybody who wants to know, that's probably the best book. Now, if you're looking for reading pleasure, you never will go wrong in the rest of your life with Superstition Mountains, A Ride Through Time with our old friend Tom Collenborn. Tom's book, which I know there's still some of these getting published and printed out there. If you can get this book, awesome book. It's stories from Tom about different Dutch hunters, different parts of the legend, but some of talking about his life and so forth. This is a great read because it's basically, he wrote it in the 70s. So it has Tom's flair, but it covers a lot of people he knew. but it's not as in depth of like, historically, but I know it has Doc Rosicron's Jabez Clapp, has Adolf Ruth. It covers a lot of the legends you hear here and there about. So those are two great books. I mean, if you can find them, which you should be able to, if you look on Amazon or any place like that. I have a bookshelf of 140. Do you want to go through those?
No, what about the Bible?
Okay, hold on, Jack.
That has a lot. That has a lot of stuff in there.
I like Bob Corbin. Okay, I talked to Bob Corbin. Bob Corbin's an awesome guy. Helen, his wife, was a lovely person. This was her first book. It was called Curse of the Dutchman's Gold. If you find one of these, this book is great. You'll find a lot of this stuff in that book is in this book. Okay. This book she put out, I think it's probably the early 80s. So really, really good book. I have no fault or anything with this book. The problem is, you know why you can't find that book you just showed me on the bookshelves?
No.
Because there was an individual that gave Helen a lot of false and fake information that's included in that book. The individual might be watching us tonight, and he might be kind of curling his toes at the very thought of this, but it was a horrible, awful thing. Bob pulled the book off the bookshelves because of it. It's very sad. I liked the book. It's hard to read it when someone puts so much fake information into it, and then he tried to backpedal from it. But he wanted to make a name for himself, and he created stories and characters who are not real people, and even a fictitious back life, and it kind of ruined it. So if someone sees this book has the core material that's in that book. It's a great read. But if you're reading that book, we don't have all the time in the day to go through what's wrong with that book. And that's why Bob pulled it. Bob pulled it off the bookshelves. It would have still been in print. It still would have been available, but he was so embarrassed by what happened. Bob pulled it, and so I'm very happy. I have a couple copies and they're autographed. The only reason I would keep them, and the only reason I have these, and the reason is like these type of things, when they're signed by the people. I can't dump a book that's signed by Helen. This one's signed by her as well, and most of my books were signed by the individuals involved. So even though I have a ton of problems, I'm not going to black it out or anything. That book will always sit there on the bookshelf. I only reference it when I'm trying to figure out why I'm thinking wrong about something. And I realize what it is because I read that book probably 20 times. I still have something in that book from that book that's wrong in my head. And I have to look at it to realize, oh, that's why. Okay. I picked up that misinformation. Yeah. And that's an unfortunate aspect. That's kind of like, I don't think everybody wants to make a huge public deal out of it now that it's not on the bookshelves. I wish Bob Corbin, and I know he won't, but I wish he would put this one back on the bookshelves because it didn't have a good binding to it. It fell apart pretty easy, but it is a really good book. And it's got some nice details and stuff, and it had some information from Tom as well. So when they did the Bible, which came out, about 2001, 2000, somewhere around there, just about then, 99.
Was that long ago?
Yeah, it was a while back because Thomas Glover's book came out right after it, I think.
Yeah, 2002.
2002, and I think Thomas's book came out 2003. I think they were like bang bang at the same time.
Wow.
But that's the problem with it. When you come to the rendezvous, we'll sit around for a while. You bring your book. I'll show you some of the stuff and explain it. Once you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to sort through it.
That's too big. No, but we're going to get into the rendezvous.
No, it'll just be dropping a few things to you personally.
Oh, okay.
In person, and you'll know when you read through it what to kind of like, oh, okay, now I understand what he's talking about and stuff. So
Okay.
we don't dwell on that, but yeah. But those, like I said, the hiking guides, anything that's got Tom Collenborn's name on it is always a worthwhile read. Like I said, I like The Curse of the Dutchman's Gold. And then there's the older books. A lot of the older books are always good reads, depending on the vernacular. But they're, you got to remember Sim Zeeley's book, Killer Mountains. A lot of those are meant as treasure hunting storybooks. So there can be some good facts, but they're meant to be a travelogue about somebody's journey and treasure hunt. And they're well written. Most of those were done by either ghostwriters for the individual or professional writers like Kurt Gentry. And when a professional writer writes a book like that, it's always much better. So
I can't read. I can't sit down to read, so I have to just look at pictures and try to figure out where the clues are at. Hey, but we need to talk about. Let me see. I want to see who popped into this chat room there. Craig Carter, Richard Duke, Bobby, Jenon, American Gold, Stephen Peasley. Oh, Stephen Darrell. Trucking Nomad. Let me see, make sure I got everybody in here. Bill Sherry, Stephen. Okay, I think. But anyway, so what we need to. Oh, Captain Reynolds, second that wash, and Richard Duke. Let's switch gears. Talk a little bit about this rendezvous. Actually, let me play a couple commercials. Can you hang with us while I do some commercials? And
yeah, how much time do I got?
A couple minutes.
Okay, I'll puff a few.
You got 3 minutes. How's that?
3 minutes. I got a timer on me.
Cool. We'll be right back, folks. Hold on.
ICMJ's Prospecting and Mining Journal is the only monthly gold prospecting magazine published in the United States and is the most comprehensive and respected magazine about gold prospecting on the market today. With readers in all 50 states, it features articles on detecting, high banking, dredging, small-scale operations, assaying, basic geology, how to read the land, regulations, and more. Our monthly Ask the Experts column is answered by true experts. It features answers to readers' questions on processing, detecting, geology, and any other questions you may have related to finding and recovering gold and other precious metals. The Mining Journal features the most extensive selection of equipment, mining properties, services, and more, and a classified section featuring over 20 times more new and used items than the nearest competitor. The Mining Journal has been in continuous publication since 1931. A full 12 issues is available for just $27.95, and discounts are available for 2- and 3-year subscriptions. And an online subscription gives you access to over 3,000 articles going back nearly 20 years. Our purpose is to teach you how to find more gold. ICMJ's Prospecting and Mining Journal is the tool you need to succeed. It's time to raise your gold prospecting knowledge to the next level with ICMJ's Prospecting and Mining Journal. Give us a call at 831-479-1500 or visit www.icmj.com. That's www.icmj.com.
Do you enjoy metal detecting? Do you enjoy finding gold? Join us on October 14th and 15th, Saturday and Sunday, when we will do a push on a private mining claim located near Meadview, Arizona, which is south of Lake Mead in the Lost Basin area. We have found a lot of gold in the past. We will be back. With a backhoe, we will expose new ground in proving nugget patches. Join us and get your share of the gold. We will be on site to help anyone who needs help with their detector or in locating their share of the gold. The cost is only $100 per person. We will even provide hamburgers on Saturday night. You can camp on the claim or stay in the nearby RV park or hotel. Call now and reserve your spot in this limited hunt. Call 928-851-7167. That number again is 928-851-7167. Call now.
All right, welcome back. Birdman says, I'll puff with one with you, Wayne, too. Yeah. Sean, hello. Daniel Grubby, I think too many of the treasured books are overly misleading. Reading them, and one would assume that treasure exists nearly everywhere. Well, I think like anything, like let's just say Charlie Stanton, for instance. Charlie Stanton was a bad guy, robbed a lot of people. He hid a lot of treasures out there. Where's it all at? There's books out there. And you know what? Even I wrote one. I never published it, but I wrote my theory behind Charlie Stanton. So what do? Get my information from everybody else. Take what you believe and you do your own stuff.
Let's always
Anyway.
remember. Let's always remember too. When someone writes a book, they're not telling you the secrets to their treasure hunt.
No, they're not telling you where it really is at.
Yeah, everybody. It's always 3-card Monty. I mean, let's face it. You know, you'd be pretty stupid to say I solved it and here's where it's at and here it all is. I just don't have it yet. I mean,
Yeah. So when I do the book of the Superstition Mountains, and I'll just say I think it's over here someplace. Okay, let me ask you a real serious question.
Oh,
How
we've
many
been
times-
we've been clowning around for now. Jeez. Okay.
How many times have you been in the Superstition?
Oh, I couldn't even guess. Because
Okay.
last year alone, with what the Dawn's Discovery Camp, the trails, the hikes I did and stuff, I mean, just this year, it's probably been, my God, it's just so hard to encompass it. It's several dozen or more, at least.
Many.
It could be 40 or 50. So over the years, and when I was younger, and I would go out every other weekend. So there's times we've talked, my son and I, when the new year hits, especially during the winter, there's times we get up to April, and I always think it's a hollow, empty week when I haven't been in the mountains. So we're talking April or May, and then I'm like finally done with going every week. So I think for people that love, because there's a difference between love for the Dutchman, the hunting, the search, but there's also a love for the mountains. And if nothing else, if I can just spend a day in the mountains, I'm just happy as a clam. I mean, I just enjoy going up out there. And if it's a bad day, rainy day, I sit in the back of the truck and just watch the mountains. I'm happy. So, you know, if it doesn't turn out, who cares, man? Because it's better to be out in the mountains than doing a lot of things. So I'm always good with that. And I'm always up for a trip. The problem with a lot of people always think it's, you know, I have some sort of availability that they can just at a drop of a dime get me to go. The problem is you got so many other things you're doing, my own things that I'm doing out in the mountains and other things on top of it that involve the mountains. So people don't understand is there's only so many trips I can make. And I push it. I mean, I push it every year. As I get older, I'm pushing it more and more. But yeah, and then you have to consider when we filmed the TV shows, we spent 6 weeks in and out of the mountains constantly. And most, you know, pretty much there was day in, day out in the mountains. So it becomes a significant amount of time. Now, Clay Worst once, I don't know if it was 30, 40 days or 3 months. He spent significant time. There's a number of people that spent like every single day out there. And I have all due respect for them because I can't, you know, I'm sure back in the day, 50, 60 years ago, that was a lot easier than today. Because today, you know, there is one problem with treasure hunting today. You have to have a job. This isn't the time where you could just live in a trailer and, you know, a lot of guys spent significant time living in the mountains because once they got their Social Security, they literally spent the summer in town on their Social Security and then the rest of the time in the mountains, packed in the mountains and living in the mountains. I don't think anybody can do that. Even with the Forestry Service, if you could dodge them, I don't think you can afford to do that anymore. So, and plus you know, the droughts have killed us on the springs too. You'd have to camp near water.
So are you? So you've been in there a lot of times, then. So are you still working? Do you have a regular day job?
Yeah, of course, because I don't want to be broke.
Okay, well then that just leads me to the other question that I guess you've never found the.
Well, you know, that's also the other thing. If you find the Lost Dutchman mine, let's put it this way. The government, the Forestry Service, the United States government, the Department of Agriculture, everybody and their brother could try to take everything from you. But as long as I really have a job that I love and enjoy and don't mind going into, and you got to understand, I work for you're familiar, I won't say their name, but the electrical utility company in Arizona. There's a few, but I work for the big one. And they allowed me to go film that TV show, kept my job for me. And I was a supervisor, and they allowed me to do the TV show and come back and have my job still. They were very encouraging and backed me up awesome on that. But just to say, I learned one lesson there. I was making more money on my overtime and then coming back in town sometimes and working on the weekends than doing television. So I realized how well my job paid and how well I was doing in that part of life. And I also realized that's the perfect cover story. You
Good,
want a cover
good.
story, you need to be have a job, making good money. And you know what? If I, you don't know, man. I mean, you can sell gold every week, every corner. So you can pay for things with cash. So long as, nobody's catching that cash, no matter what gold you have. And I won't tell you what other people have done, but I've learned that lesson from them is if you're finding anything, you need to be very careful, because once people know you have it, they're going to come pounding on your door. A lot of the gold, I would have had is either been sold or given away, even small. I'm sure you've done it, given small amounts of gold to people who've never found gold. I mean, it's kind of a cool thing. It's like giving someone $10, $15, $20 worth of gold. You watch their eyes light up because they've never held raw placer gold or something in their life. And then they're just blown away by it. But yeah, you have to have a job, whether you find it or you're successful or not. Anyone that says, this is what I do for a living, if they're driving a decent pickup truck and, their clothes aren't threadbare. Yeah, no, that's just a modern day thing today. And you're going to be happier, because the other lesson I learned from everybody, from Tom Collenborn, Clay Worst, everybody else, is you have to have balance. You can be obsessed. You can be passionate. I can tell you things out of books that are just phenomenal. I can say I've wasted 50% of my brain on stuff like, why do I know this stuff, and dates and all these little things? But you know what? I still have a life. I still coached all my kids in baseball, and I'm still active in my community, and I still do a lot of other things. And people are always surprised at those things. I've been an appointed commissioner for our planning and zoning committees. I did redistricting for the city of Surprise with the Federal Justice Court. I did a lot of things outside of that. And I've realized that balance in life of a lot of things you're doing helps associate it, because I work, I do this, and then I sit back sometimes at work when I'm bored, and this stuff can go through, and I can process better because I keep it separated. And I think that's really important to everybody. If you're too obsessed with it and can't do anything but think about it all the time, then you need to not just get a hobby, you need to find a way to break yourself from it, because you'll process and think better if your mind's able to separate from it. So, and some of the best stuff I've come up with and some of the things I figured out the best is because I haven't dwelt on it. It's just out of the blue. I'm sitting there and then suddenly it pops and I understand it because of the relevance of something else. So I think that's always important. A good job. I will say this, all our fathers were correct. Get a good job. Quit peddling around, get a decent job, and then do whatever you want to do. And I've learned that in life. You can accomplish a lot more with a good job and a paycheck, because that paycheck helps a lot.
So do you give away a lot of gold then?
I'm fascinated, Jack. Absolutely not, Jack. No, I was saying from the perspective, like when we went out, Frank and I and Woody were out one day, and we had a break in filming. It was the only day I had a break in filming where I could just kind of screw around. We went out to one of their claims, and we panned for gold, and all the crew that came with us got gold. So what we did was just pan and make sure everybody had an equal amount and stuff. And I've seen Frank kind of very generously make sure people have something, because he likes them to, this is Superstition Mountain Gold. You could say it's Dutchman or not, but it's Superstition Mountain Gold. And that's a rarity in itself. Most people don't have gold from the Superstition Mountains. Frank has an amount of it, and he occasionally, when people are very kind, very nice people, Frank's made sure that he gives them a smile. And I think it's a cool thing, because I think you have people that have gold fever that can take them over and kind of make them a little obsessive about it. But there's also a thing of, like I said, it's just cool to see someone who witnesses of, like, this is for real. People actually find this in the ground. And when we did that with the crew, it was a bunch of 30, 40, 50-year-olds turning into 5, 6-year-old children, because they're panning it and finding it in their own pans, and then we're helping them and getting it out and making sure they have, and they all got to go home with something like that. So I think that's the cool thing. The whole time that day, Jack, to disappoint everyone, I just filled buckets for everybody. because I'd been there, done that. I knew we weren't going to cash in and make 50, 100 grand. So my thing was, I didn't really care. I just wanted to fill buckets so everybody could pan as much as they could and find some gold. So that was my part in it, was to make sure everybody got the opportunity to find something. So there you got that. But yeah, so don't come up asking me and Frank for gold.
No. Okay.
Frank will shoot you. I'll just give you a really stern look.
Okay. So let's talk about
Jack, were you going to ask for some?
Well, hey, if you found the Dutchman's gold and you're giving away gold, I want my share. So, but okay. So you do this rendezvous every year.
Yeah, I got the hat.
What dates is that?
November 3rd, 4th, and 5th this year. It will be at the Don's Base Camp, which is located along Peralta Road, down by the Peralta Trailhead. When you're going in, we got some signage that'll be up for that event. At the Lost Gold Mine Trail, which is a turnoff to your left, just before you get to Peralta Trailhead, you will pull in. It's a big circular parking lot. When you get to the back end of it, the west end of it, you'll see there's this little road that goes up the hill, little dirt road. If you follow that dirt road up, when you crest the hill, you'll see a big gate that says the Dons. And that's the Dons camp. You go through there. It'll be opened up on Friday around noon till Sunday. And we have our event there. This will be the 19th annual Dutch Hunters Rendezvous. So we've been out there for 19 years. That's also was home to the Dons Trek, when they had the Trek for probably 50, 60, 70 years out there, and a number of other functions. So it has a 2,000 person capacity amphitheater. We have toilets. There's men's and ladies restrooms. In the evenings, the women usually use the men's because the women's is kind of down in the hollow. But we have several rendezvous. There's some covered areas where first come, first serve. Some people will camp and set up and station their camp, but there's plenty of room for people with RVs in the upper camp and stuff and trailers. They can come into the camp. There's an upper and lower camp. The upper camp is up. It'll look over the amphitheater. Plenty of space up there. And then the lower camp, there's the lower camp. The south end of the lower camp has a lot of open space for trailers, RVs, and tents and camping. And then we have an upper section of the camp. So, and then the big evening is Saturday nights. We have guest speakers just about sundown. We'll set up in the amphitheater. If depending on the crowd, the amphitheater has been awesome and the weather's been great for it. And then we have a number of guest speakers this year to kind of promote him. Another Jack, because there's a lot of Jacks. Jack Carlson, Jack Tucker, and here's another one, Jack Sanfelice, the author. Jack Sanfelice will be out this year. He has a new book out called Finding El Dorado, and it just came out, brand new book. It's kind of a revision of his Jacob Waltz's Lost El Dorado, but it's got new information and stuff, and it's available at jacksanfelice.com, because we always like to support our buddies and friends and the authors who are writing stuff. Jack it might be his last Lost Dutchman book. I don't know. But Jack just put that out. It should be anytime soon. It's available through his website. So if you go to his website and you get the pre-order in, he'll sign it and send one out to you. If not there, you could probably find it at the Superstition Mountain Museum or the Goldfield Ghost Town Museum. And you could always bring it to the rendezvous, and Jack would be more than happy to sign it. And you could get it signed by Jack Carlson, Jack Tucker, or Jack Sanfelice, or all three. So you could have a book of Jacks. There you go.
Will he have any at the rendezvous?
I'm sure he'll bring some. I can mention it to him. He usually does, and he usually gives one away in the raffle. We have a raffle to help support stuff. One other thing we do before the guest speakers that night, we get a big pot of chili together. So anybody that comes in just for the guest speakers stuff, because they're missing dinner or they're coming in the afternoon, evening, we have chili we make up for everybody. So we are holding the jalapenos, because there's problems in the restrooms when we put jalapenos in the chili, and people have complained about the condition of the bathrooms afterwards. So yes, we do not put jalapenos in the chili anymore. There will be cheese, but there will not be jalapenos.
Here's my questions then that I've wanted to ask of you. That week always interfered with my doing here in camp, because the metal detecting hunts are always the first weekend. Yeah. So this year in November, I've made it that I'm planning to make this rendezvous and postpone the detector hunt the following week. Okay, so I will be coming in with a camper on the back of my truck.
Yeah.
Okay, so wherever I can camp at, that's okay. But my main question is too, on bringing, say, my razor. Is
Yeah.
that something worthwhile having around to get around easier on?
You don't need it in the camp. The camp's pretty easy to walk around in, so I don't think there's anything. And if you want to go up and down Peralta Road on the Razor, that's fine with me. But the camp, I mean, you can look at the camp from Google Earth or Google Maps. Just follow the Peralta Road up. You will see the Peralta Trailhead, the Lost Gold Mine Trailhead. And then when you go over just past north of the gold mine, Lost Gold Mine, you will see the Ramadas and the setup of the camp. Everything's walking distance. It's nothing difficult. So, I mean, if you want to, it's just it'll be just short little bursts you're going because it's not going to be that far. Most of the day, everybody spends up in the big Ramada. We have a large Ramada area. A lot of people hang out in there. If not in their camps, they'll hang out up in there during the day because there's lots of shade. There's usually some fire going to keep the bugs away. And people like to gather in different groups and listen in, which is one of the cool aspects. And as we lose people, it gets a little sadder. But one of the cool aspects used to be you can come up there and sit and listen to Tom Collenborn talk. You can move over, listen to Jack Sanfelice. You can move over, listen to Clay Worst talk at his camp. You could move around before the guest speakers and listen to these guys telling stories. And there still are people that come out and tell stories, but that's one of the cool things. And you don't know who you'll meet or who you will hear talking. There's a lot of people. I won't give away some of the backgrounds. A lot of guys spend a lot of time in the 60s and 70s in the mountains prospecting for various people and searching for the Dutchman. And they come in the camp and share stories too. They don't like to be identified as such. They will tell the stories. They just don't want people to know how they were associated. So they don't want to be guest speakers.
Okay, if I get lost in the superstition in Salvador, we'll show you. Somebody told me to bring my razor because we could go off and go like exploring or go gold panning someplace or something like that.
You could do that. Well, they put the Peralta County Park in now. So that kind of sucked because that took that area. And I would send you down where we found those coins down at Burns Ranch because we found a bunch of old turn of the century silver dollars. And I would send you down there. But that's kind of off the grid. There are some stuff going out the turnoff to the Quarter Circle U. You can go down to the streams and on the south side of the Peralta Road, Quarter Circle U washes. There is some area there you can still drive back into and go into. Quarter Circle U is now gated off. You can't cut through there anymore. They've kind of stopped the traffic going through there. The Forestry Service allowed them to shut down that road because they were getting a lot of unnecessary traffic and problems through the ranch, which is sad, which is one of the problems with sometimes what comes with popularity and a lot of people who don't have the respect. It creates a big problem for someone Chuck back. Why him and Judy don't own the ranch anymore. They sold it to his son-in-law and daughter-in-law. But they're running an active cattle ranch. It's a business, which people have to remember. Those people are not interested in the Lost Dutch Mine. They don't care about any crazy theories or sightseeing or tourists. They are running a cattle ranch. And people have a hard time separating the Yellowstone nostalgia Western thing with people who actually that's a business to them. And they're very, very nice people. And I have nothing but greatest respect for them, but I completely understand them taking away that access because they were having to deal with, it doesn't take too many people acting up and acting like idiots to shut something down for people, which is unfortunate. But there was a lot of great stuff back in there because there was a lot of cowboys and a lot of stuff dropped and lost.
So can we bring metal detectors?
Yeah, you can bring metal detectors in the Don's camp because that's leased to us. There is some national forest area out there. The Don's camp surrounding area to the north of it is within the wilderness area, which you're not supposed to. But that's always, I think, the area of if you don't get caught, then you're not in trouble.
Okay. What about somebody or you or somebody is going to show us where the spiral staircase is?
That's nowhere near there. I will tell you. I will show you where it's at. If you want to make the hike out there. Can
we drive?
I've tried to do everything I've done to show people how dangerous it is, how bad. It's very unstable now. And there's a couple other people that have worked with me and they go out there to kind of monitor its deterioration. But one of the reasons I did what I did was to kind of keep people from wanting to go out to it because someone's going to be standing on that edge and it's going to give away, and that's going to be the end, because it is starting to finally fall apart. And you never know when one of those things. It's not like it never was shored up. It never was a mine. It was just a pit that was dug down to a tunnel in alluvial. So there's no shoring. There's nothing to that. It's just collapsing as the ground goes. And that was my worry, and my reason for documenting it the way I did is I wanted to show the inherent dangers. And the last trip I made that I dropped in there, it was tough. I mean, it was really tough. And we only filmed certain parts. I wanted to film more, but the problem was there was only 2 of us, and I had to have my son really work the rope and rigging equipment to me. And then as I was down in there, anything he moved, it was causing things from the side, rocks, to bang off my hard hat. So, and when rocks are falling down into a funnel pit, they're coming off other things and shooting at you sideways. And so I got down in there, and when I got out, I was so gassed. It wasn't, people tease me like, oh, you're out of shape. That was rough. If I was in my youth, it was still a rough thing because of how hot it gets down in there. It was nice weather up top, but it gets hot down in there. Plus your adrenaline's rushing, and the dirt and everything's collapsing at an angle going down in. So you're just the whole time, every muscle is trying to keep you upright from sliding down in and falling in. And plus you're having to worry everything you're on if you're loosening something up. So I don't mind showing someone where it's at. Once they get out there, I just hope they have the common sense to understand, wow, this is really that was a bad idea. Wayne was, and I agree, it was a stupid idea. It was a bad idea, but it got to the point where I really wanted people to understand the implications of what could happen. And there's been a couple people besides me that went out and attempted and made it so far, but it's just, like I said, I wanted to kind of show people there's a lot of times something seems really exciting and the legend and myth had been built on it. And I wanted people to see sometimes you get down in there and there's absolutely nothing but just a dangerous situation. And that happens to us all. We get in places where that was absolutely the dumbest thing. But at least I was the idiot that went in there and safely got myself out to show other people, don't be an idiot like me. So, because I don't want someone to get hurt in one of those situations.
No. So
Jack, I like you, so I'm a little reluctant to tell you where it's at.
No. Well, no, I just, because people's talked about it. That's why. Yeah. Just to look at it.
It's a very cool place full of a lot of mystery in the area. And if you watch our videos on our channel at Legend of Superstition Mountains, we revealed a lot. We tried to be as open as possible, a lot of things in the history and what we found out about it. We didn't try to do anything for entertainment purposes. We just tried to document as we made trips. And people got to understand when we do that stuff, you see 40 minutes, 50 minutes of an episode. We're out there for 8-10 hours, but do you really want to watch me sitting there smoking cigarettes for an hour and a half? And me and Frank talking about something just trivial, or it's like how long can you watch a person with a metal detector go beep 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 before it's just you're over it? So it's condensed to what we think of that trip kind of makes the most sense for people to watch. But there's a lot of time we spend out there, and there's a lot of stuff that it's not cutting room floor anymore. We save everything we film. By the way, there are hard drives. I don't think you can see them. I'm trying to figure out which angle I'm at. It's the other way. Over here, there's a bunch of hard drives that are just filled with footage of stuff. And we just try to put the stuff out there that implies and shows the best story possible that explains what's going on. So, but anybody wants to know, I can give them directions. I don't have a problem because it's on Google Maps. But if someone, I always leave them with this. If you go out there and you're stupid enough to get yourself caught up in it, that's fine. Just don't, I don't want someone to come to me and blame me for it.
Okay, so getting into this, I'm trying to figure out where this place is at because I'm not the staircase. Just how do you talk? Where is that going up to like Florence Junction over?
Yeah, you're leaving Apache Junction on the 60, and there's a Peralta Road. At the Peralta subdivision, it'll be on the left. You go through Gold Canyon, you'll see the turn to that, and then after that, you'll go over the hill, and there'll be a Peralta Road sign. It has a light on it, and you go through there's a subdivision now there at the entrance, and then there's a school on your right, I think it's Peralta Elementary School, and then you take a road. I think it's about 7-8 miles. Go back in there. It's usually a really good dirt road. Now it should even be better because they put the Pinal County Park there now on the south side. You'll see some campers along the road, and then you'll get to a section that you can see the road goes straight ahead, but it looks like it's deteriorated a little. That goes to the Quarter Circle U Ranch. That'll be gated off over the hill. And then if you look to the left, you'll see it kind of winds up around the hill, does a curve. So it does a split, but the one road goes uphill turning. You go up the hill turning, going north then at that point. And then you follow that. You'll pass by what's called the Apache Kid Cave parking lot, which will be on your left. You continue down the road. It's only about 2.5 miles. And before you if you get to the Peralta Trailhead parking lot with the bathroom, you've went too far, turn around and come back. But you'll see a sign. There'll be a sign that says Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, and there's another sign that says Lost Gold Mine Trail on your left. You turn in that. It's a big, huge, circular, open parking lot. And at the far west end, there's a sign that shows you where the trailhead is for the information for the trail. When you get to that end of the parking lot, if you look to your right, you'll see a little road going up the hill. We'll have another sign pointing, but you start going up that little track up that road, and you'll see a block wall with a gate, and the signage and everything says the Dons. And you go through that, and then you'll be in the upper camp. As you turn in, you'll see the big Don sign. Once you pass that, just to the left past that, you'll see a road that goes down into the lower camp where all the ramadas, the bathrooms, and then you'll see it. Most everybody will be down in that area most of the time.
So where do you camp at up there?
When you come in and you come down the hill, usually my camp is the first one on the left. There's a flat area. Joe Roboto used it for years. I usually set my camp in that spot. It's kind of usually the camp host, the guy that kind of is in the camp. There'll be some other people pitch camps, around me, but I usually take the one section. It's really flat and nice, so I like it. The RV guys hate me and trailer guys hate me for it because it's a flat spot, but I use it because it's very recognizable coming in. And then usually after the guest speakers, sometimes we meet and have a campfire, and we sit around and we'll drink and sit around the campfire Friday and Saturday night. I'm just talking and shooting the breeze. Well, when we do that, it's nice to have it near someone's campsite, and it's usually in that camp. That was always the traditional. Sometimes we'll do it in the big Ramada, but we always kind of do it there because the other thing is you come in because there's no lights. There's no electricity out there. When you're coming up over that hill, when I have a fire in that area and we're sitting around, you can look down and see us in there. If we're in the Ramada, you don't really have that much light you can see. We had one year we were all sitting in one of the Ramadas, and we had a little fire going and stuff. And there was about a dozen of us talking, and about 20 people showed up, but they turned around and left because they thought the camp was empty because they couldn't see any light from where we were. So I've always tried to keep that open space, right, where you kept on the top of the hill and you're going to look down, see my tents and stuff sitting there prominently, but you also see a fire and see there's people there.
So when do you get there?
Probably around noon on Friday. I try to arrive just about then. That's when we want the gates to open. So there has to be a member of the Dons of Arizona there for the gates to be open.
And what is there? Is there going to be a long ass line then of everybody at noon getting in?
The most people we ever had there was probably 250 to 300. It's never that. First night Friday, a lot of guys from out of town come in, and there'll be some people at camp, and they'll come in at different times because Friday some of them get off work and they've traveled and this and that. So we'll have a little bit of that. Saturday is when you'll see people, and there's people that come in Saturday in the morning, and then before the afternoon, they want to get out of there before nightfall, some of the older people. So they won't stay for the guest speakers. But we've had years, we're averaging now 150 people. We got up around, like I said, close to 300. And that's where I was getting the Dons more involved, saying if it keeps expanding, we're going to need more help from the Dons. Because right now, pretty much I just go in there, do it, and it's just we let it kind of work itself out. But if it ended up too many people, that creates another problem. Plus, the other problem with the rendezvous, and one of the reasons we didn't advertise it as much as we could, one, it's a free event, so there's no money to be really made there. But secondly is, I don't want to do anything to take the Dutch hunters, the authors, those guys from being comfortable in the setting of coming out and hanging out. What makes it so cool is you can take guys that have written books the last 10, 20 years. They're going to be sitting in the camp. And think about this. There was you got an evening campfire and we're sitting around. Some guys are drinking coffee. Some guys are drinking beer. And you have former State Attorney General Bob Corbin and Clay Wurst and Tom Collenborn. And you got someone like myself and the people associated with this. But you got people like that you've seen on TV. You got people that have written books like Jack Sanfelice, Jack Carlson. We're all just sitting in this big circle around a fire. So I think it's important to keep that atmosphere where all of us feel really good about coming in with people. So people get introduced to it and people get to meet. It's a really cool thing to say, wow, I've read all these books and all these guys are here. And that's a big deal. And then there's guys that have been associated with different groups in the mountains, and some of them don't mind everybody knowing. But it's cool, again, to have those guys come in and share their stories. What it's like to live back in the mountains, what it was like to work with Crazy Jake up on Peters Mesa in the 70s. It's really interesting to hear their perspective of these stories. And I never want to lose that, because that's the history and what I think is most interesting to people, not just going out and talking and just filling up theories and, possibilities and opinions. It's us, we always joke we're telling lies, but some of the best stories you've ever heard around a campfire are told in there. It's just because these guys have traveled not only all over the Southwest, but through Mexico and all over the place. And they've been treasuring, like Bob Schuess, Ron Feldman. Some of these guys have been treasure hunting Clay Wurst back into the 40s. So you can imagine the number of stories in their travels of what they have. And they are some of the most hilarious anecdotes, once you get a little booze in them, that you could ever. But I can say I've sat there and had a nightcap with Clay Wurst in his camp, which is awesome. And, so, and I think that's always good for everybody. And my son, I don't think would have ever gotten into it, but he sat around with Clay and Tom and Bob and Ron, and he got to spend time with them in that camp listening to their stories. So will you have hats and T-shirts? We don't keep inventory. We will have something to give away. I asked Trevor to make sure there was hats, rendezvous hats. I don't really push the Legends stuff at the rendezvous. Because I consider that a separate thing, but we'll have rendezvous hats. We should have some shirts. We'll probably give them away, but that's up to Trevor, and we'll have coffee cups. So we'll have them available. But I want to give some stuff away because I'm always thankful for everybody who comes out, and all our stuff for the rendezvous is not dated. So if you buy a hat today, it's the same good hat 10 years from now. Because I wanted it and we bought quality stuff. The only reason the price is where it's at is we make nothing off of it. We did it just simply to make sure there was a quality product that if people wanted something, they could have it. Because let's face it, Jack, you got to agree with me. If you're going to try to go into the T-shirt business, you're never going to make a dime. It's going to cost you so much in inventory, you'll lose. So we wanted just to make products that people would buy, and we've sold a lot of shirts and hats and stuff. But I just wanted to make something that people could buy and it wouldn't wear out the first year. I want something that, I don't know. My shirts are 3 or 4 years old and they still are in pretty good condition. So I just wanted good quality material. So we will probably have some there, but that's up to Trevor. And we paid the price way back in the early days of the rendezvous of buying, like everybody said they'd buy coffee cups and we'd bring out 40 and then 5 got sold. Well, if you have 2007 rendezvous coffee cups, guess what? In 2008, they're worth nothing.
Well, so no date.
By 2012, we were giving them away because we just realized take your losses. In fact, I got some on a shelf of, and you can't see them in the picture, but I have some duplicates on a shelf because it was just like we couldn't give them away. Then people wanted us to ship them, but everybody we shipped them to, oh, this one had a chip. Can you send me another one? So we ended up losing money on it. So I just wanted something so anybody wanted stuff, they could have something for the rendezvous, kind of to memorialize it to that extent. So we will try, but that's a Trevor thing. And if you catch our lives on Fridays, I will mention what we're going to bring out. The other thing is sizes, and Jack knows this. You got to have like a size for everybody, and it's hard, man, because some guys are 2XLs, there's the 3XLs, there's extra large, then there's the larges, then there's the mediums, then there's the smalls, then there's the women says I need a children's small. It's like by the time you get 10 of each, you've spent a couple $1,000s. And then if nobody comes and buys the shirt, you're stuck with all these shirts.
Well, I need some, so tell Trevor, make sure I got mine set aside.
Okay.
Stephen sent me the map how to get there. Thanks, Stephen. So you're going to be there about noon, you said. So I want to be there too, and then you're going to take me down. I'd love to follow you down in there and set up near where you are.
Okay, one Jack, I drive like a madman through there because I've driven it so many times. Trevor says I never look at the road. I just look at him talk the whole time, smoking a cigarette as I drive. Plus, it's easy to find. You won't have a problem, I promise you. You will be able to get cell. Once you get on the road in, you lose your cell till you get there. But at the start that's there, you should be able to have no problem to find it. You do not want to follow someone closely because it's monotonous, it's slow, and everything's going to have dirt because it's all going to come in the vents and everything's going to be full of dust from everybody going in and out. But you should find it. We have a video. If you look, it has like a big longhorn steer on it. And it was from several years ago, and it talks about the rendezvous. And it was actually us driving into the rendezvous and then filming at the base camp. So if you watch that, we actually talk as we're driving in and explain where the turns are and show you. So if you can find that, I don't think you'll have a problem. When you see it, you'll be like, wow, that was simple. Because it's a pretty easy road.
Well, I'll be there at noon. So
okay. If I don't see you there at 2 or 3 o'clock, I'll come looking for you.
Okay.
Or I won't. That'll be my problem. Either I'll come looking for you, or I'll completely have forgotten.
Yeah, you.
So
yeah, well, anyway,
you have my word on that.
My plan's to be there around noon, so I look forward to it. There's a lot of people a few people in the chat room here that goes every year. And so I even told them that I was going to make it out this year. So
I think you'll enjoy it. It's just very laid back. That's the big thing about it. You don't feel like it just feels like everybody can just sit there and talk and just answer. Ever heard of Palmer, Ashley, and the Lost Gold Vein? No.
Okay. Anyway, so so we can start wrapping things up. So everybody that wants to follow you, hear more about you, where can they go to?
Okay, you can check us out on YouTube at the Legend of the Superstition Mountains. We have a show every Monday. That's a filmed studio show. Then we do lives on Fridays, but we also run archival footage and stuff like that on Fridays alternatively, where we're showing stuff that we've digitized from the 50s and 60s and stuff. So it doesn't have sound. We don't do anything fancy with it. We just kind of run it from how these guys filmed it back in the day. Some of it has Tom Collenborn doing interviews with people and stuff like that. We have a website, www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com, which has the bark notes. It has all the information and has the links to everything, and it has bibliography and stuff. So if you check all our stuff out, you're going to be pretty well tired of the Lost Dutchman mine and me by the time you're done. Additionally, you can always check the links for other stuff. One heads up, and maybe we'll hook back up next year. I'll let you know when it's coming. I did do work this summer for History Channel and A&E for History's Greatest Mysteries with Lawrence Fishburne. I went out to Los Angeles and worked with them on that. They're still working with me on their season 5 for this next new year for January, February when they break into season 5. And they've been really good to me. And I'm thinking they're putting a really cool program together. I was very, very impressed by how methodical they've been. They've been calling me and emailing me almost daily for little bits and pieces of maps and different things and photographs they want to use in the program. So I'm hoping it's going to be a great quality program, really easy to sit through. But yeah, I will push big time for them, and we will be doing a little thing when it gets closer to that episode releasing, which I think will be fun for everyone because I filmed with my phone as I was out there in Hollywood working on the soundstage and doing stuff. So people get a little insight. What's it like when they bring you in and you go and work and you're working with all these people and you're in a hotel and they're taking you and giving you drivers, more or less just to show people it's not near as glamorous. It's just kind of like boring. But I did do like a 6-hour journey to Venice Beach on foot and got lost. So it was an interesting travel. You know, I don't get lost in the superstitions, but I got lost in Venice Beach. It was hot that day too, Jack. But anyways, if you just look up Legends of Superstition Mountains, you'll find us somewhere on the web. Anything Chasing Legends of the show on Mondays, and always watch Jack and anybody associated with this stuff. I don't think anyone should ever kind of blow off or badmouth, even the jerks that are out there, because the thing is, the competition is what creates everything. It's not we're being competitive. It's about everybody taking up space to create something for a variety of different things to watch. And I always encourage people to watch everybody that I work with or have anything to do with. Because like yourself, I don't know if you've ever dealt with Terry Carter, who has the Terry Carter Treasure Channel. Terry's an awesome, wonderful person. And he comes out to the rendezvous and stuff. And I love Terry to death. And I always encourage, go to Jack's channel, go to Terry's channel, go watch everybody else's stuff, because it's good for everyone. It's good for everyone to get the different thoughts and stuff. So, yeah, I'll drop in another recommendation is watch Jack. Even though you're here watching Jack, come back next week and watch Jack again, because, he loves you. He loves you and he cares. And that's important out there, is when it's somebody that really cares about this stuff.
Yeah, this year was the first year I went out to the Moon Lake Rendezvous, so got to hang out. So, with
I don't like to travel much. I hate to travel. You got to pay me money to make me travel out of here.
Oh.
Unless it's the Superstitions. I'll go to the Superstitions for free anytime. But
Craig sent me a map. Okay, cool, Craig. Anyway, so I'll be in touch before then, but my plans are I'll be there, bells on my toes and all that, so have some fun, looking forward to it. And everybody else is going out there. So
bring plenty of water. Yeah, hopefully the weather will be nice and cool at that point. Plenty of water, and if you bring some firewood, if everybody brings a bundle or so, we'll have good fires all weekend long. Okay, because that's always important too. We don't want to be sitting there at the end and, oh man, we're out of firewood, because there's nothing to burn out there anymore. So.
Okay, I'll bring some wood. All right, Wayne. Hey, we'll let you go. But before I do, I got to ask you one final question. Anybody that kind of maybe wants to go inside the superstitions for the first time, what would you recommend? Those books by Jack Carlson I was saying earlier. And the other thing is, and this is important, a number of people that watch my live show have been doing it, and other people, they message me, they find a way to contact me, they tell me I'm coming into the mountains, they talk to me a little about it, they tell me this is my car, this is my license plate, this is my name, here's where I'm parking, I'm going in at this date, I expect to return at this date, I'll send you a message when I get out of the mountains. Okay, that is an awesome thing to do, and I do that for people because if something would happen to someone, at least I know the resources for Pinal County, Maricopa Sheriffs, the Superstition Search and Rescue, and a number of different people in the Dutch hunting community that can go out and help look for them. That's the other thing. Make sure someone knows. Don't be so secretive that you don't tell someone where you're going to be. Because if you go in alone or even with your family, things happen to people. Things can happen. And when things happen, you don't want that to be the last thing that ever happens to you. So pick up those books, learn something about it. Go in the cooler months. Probably late November, December is the best time because it's really cooling off back in there. It still gets warm in the afternoons. And just take it easy. First couple of trips, just kind of like put yourself into it. Do Fremont Saddle or do something easy before you go really what you want to do, just to kind of get a feel for the mountains. And once you've done a couple of these other trips, you're going to understand the landmarks of Miner's Needle, Weaver's Needle, Blacktop Mesa, Peters Mesa. Once you recognize those areas, that'll be also another thing. You'll know where the springs because of the books, but you'll also learn those landmarks that anytime you're in there, you know to look around. You'll understand how to get yourself out of a canyon or back to a main trail. And that'll save your life every time, because once you get to the main trail, there'll be someone eventually comes along that trail. And if you get lost and you find a trail system, just start heading one way or the other, but stay on the trail. Don't try to shortcut once you think you're in bad shape, because someone will. There's plenty of people that walk those trails. Someone will come along that trail eventually. All right, Wayne, appreciate you hanging with us tonight, giving us some more insight of that info. Good luck on getting rid of all that gold. You know what? I have children. It's easy to get rid of stuff. All right, Wayne. We appreciate you. Thanks, man. And we'll talk to you soon, bud.
Thank you, Jack. It's always a pleasure. I will see you in about a month and a half.
See you. All right, everybody. Want to appreciate all you guys hanging with us. You guys all take care. Have a fantastic week. And until we meet again, thanks, everybody. See you all. Goodbye.